Welcome to Thriver TV, the place to break free from narcissistic abuse with quantum tools and understandings. And in this video today, I'm going to share with you exactly what narcissism is, as well as how it's created. And I'm also going to shed a lot of light on what you can do about narcissists cropping up in families everywhere, as well as being in epidemic proportions. So how are narcissists created? Is it nature or nurture, or is it both? Is it due to abusive or neglectful parenting, or is it a roll of God's dice? What are the ways to stop it happening or to reverse it? Okay, so before we answer these very important questions, I'm going to do my best to share with you my beliefs regarding narcissism and what is born into this planet and our homes, and why so many of us have come face to face with narcissists. And our starting point today is to understand how narcissism is created. It's recognizing exactly what narcissism is. That's so important for us to get down to first. And what I believe it is a disconnection from self, meaning it's a lack of self-awareness. And this means an inability to process emotions within self healthily, which means to be able to handle disappointment and frustrations, to be able to self-soothe or maintain good feelings on the inside, regardless of what is happening on the outside. The following is the truth. Everybody is presenting to the outside world as per their inner experience, period. And if the outer presentation is off, it means the inner experience is as its origin. It's poor self-awareness and management of emotions that is the cause of this. And of course, everybody has their limits and can break under impactful or prolonged stressful circumstances. But what I'm talking about is everyday operation. Narcissists do not have self-awareness, and they have hairline triggers. They're not people who handle disappointment and frustrations. Rather, they react badly. They have terrible feelings of anger, rage, and insecurities inside themselves. They take disappointments as slights, as personal criticism, and their feelings are so unbearable that without the ability to process them healthily, these feelings need to be offloaded onto blaming something or someone else for the misfortunate emotions that the narcissist is suffering. Narcissists don't evolve themselves or become emancipated from feeling like a hurt, angry 5-year-old who fell over in the playground and demands that someone else push them. So to the narcissist, life is a matter of me versus you. There are limited resources, and to win, somebody's got to lose somebody else. And I can't trust anyone, and I have no faith in a higher power either. I'm on my own. I'm my own God. And I need to do whatever it takes to get any of the good stuff and to stay safe. And the horrible irony is, without self-awareness, meaning the ability to be with one's inner experience and manage it to healthy feelings, growth and evolution, a human being can never escape the victimization illusions that may be holding them separated from experiencing that life is working for us and not to us. Meaning we're continually offered blessings and growth no matter what our experience looks like, to become the grateful, in tune, spectacular, joyful, expanded, effective beings that we were born to be. If we have no ability to connect to our inner experience, we have no ability to enter the ecological experience of life, the bigness, richness, and the flourishing and nourishing of it, forever releasing who we're not to make space for more of who we really are. And as a result, if we're not connected inwardly in doing that, we're like a wild animal in the jungle, scrambling around, trying to survive, imagining that we can be attacked by something or someone around every corner, which is in essence The beliefs is life is happening to me rather than for me. This is how narcissists feel. The horrible hamster wheel of feeling empty, dead, distressed and angry inside and trying to fill up with significance and stuff to stop these feelings. How would somebody behave who was trapped in this model? They would behave like a narcissist does, to varying degrees, reactionary, unreasonable and intensely poor me-ish, being victimized and over-entitled at the expense of others, meaning that this has got to be all about me. Narcissists and victimized people behave like this in their unconsciousness and their disconnection from self. And naturally, pathological narcissists also operate at the extreme end of the scale as additionally pathological and malicious. So I want to put it to you, I believe the experience of narcissism is epidemic. As a result of trauma and trauma programming, the common human experience is lack of self-awareness and not being with our inner landscape healthily. If we are to accept that being disconnected from self-awareness and healthy connection with ourselves, life and others is the definition of narcissism, how did all this start? And why are some people simply hiding out as recluses with their terrible unresolved traumas inside them? And they're not having a great flourished or abundant life, yet they're not taking other people down with them. Whereas other disconnected from self people act like narcissists, grooming, mining and sucking people dry. Is the former person capable of resolving their inner trauma and self-partnering and therefore being able to slip into the ecology of a great life? Yes, I believe they can. I used to be one of these people and I know thousands of others in this community. And even though this person may suffer many identical inner feelings to a narcissist, fear, anxiety, self-loathing and victimization, all as a result of trauma, there is still an inner being buried under that pile of trauma that can be resuscitated and brought back to life. Yet with the narcissist in our present world evolution, and hopefully that can and will change, it doesn't yet seem possible. Okay, so we know how most of us in this community, especially those of us who have committed solidly to doing the work on releasing our inner trauma, we know how we ended up unconscious and clogged up with trauma and being disconnected from ourselves and life and others, and then as our big bad wolf experience, ending up with other disconnected from self-awareness people, namely, people that didn't have a conscience. We did, they didn't, but they were also disconnected internally and they were narcissists. And we know we ended up here because of our generational traumas, our need to release the trauma patterns from our ancestors and our childhoods to help evolve ourselves and also our future generations. And we know it was because we were trained to place our value on the worth of what we were doing and getting rather than who we were being and how we were integrated within ourselves. We'd learnt to apply conditional acceptance to ourselves. Our inner emotional experience was dictated by what we got from the outside, rather than loving and accepting ourselves regardless of that person not telling us we were beautiful last night or not getting that promotion at work this week. And as thrivers, we released our inner traumas and faulty, disconnected, unhealthy beliefs that had kept us separated from self-awareness and the healthy, self-partnered inner relationship that is our birthright to live. We did that work to be emancipated into our incredible lives, and as a result, we started to genuinely thrive. So what causes the narcissist to not only be unconscious, but also unable to do the one thing that brings anyone out of unconsciousness? That one thing being accepting, saying, and actualizing, no matter what has happened to me, the only person who can heal me is me, and I'm going to stop blaming and holding responsible everything and everyone else outside of me, and instead come home to loving and healing myself back to wholeness as the most important mission of my entire life and for those I love. Why don't narcissists do this? I believe it's because the damage is so great, and the ingrained false self-beliefs and brain wiring so cemented that there is barely or no way back to wholeness. The ego is the narcissist's internal narcissist. It's forever berating, pushing and demanding to be served by the narcissist more and more and more. Its anthem is this: I'm not happy, you need to get me more. So what the narcissist demands of you is what the false self is demanding of the narcissist. The more the internal narcissist runs the show, the less self-awareness the narcissist has left to work with. And I actually really believe that a human's soul truth, their actual soul and connection to their superconscious, their God self, all comes through self-awareness, being integrated healthily in their inner experience. And I personally believe that certain souls, when completely polluted by a false self entity, check out. The lights are on, but no true life force is home. And I believe that the soul of a malignant narcissist becomes catatonic. The contamination is too great. So at what point did this happen to a narcissist, and how did it happen? I personally believe there's only one answer for anything that is not well-being and health. It's a simple 5-letter word: trauma. Trauma is the history of humanity. Look at the war, the conquest, rape, the fighting to the death over religion, beliefs and territories. What did our ancestors go through? What epigenetically do we all carry within our own internal systems? Anxiety, fear, greater ego and survival defenses, a lessened ability to connect, share and trust. These are all words that describe narcissism. Trauma is epidemic in our world, hence why medications taken for depression and anxiety is increasing in alarming rates every year. Narcissists can also take medication, but their true drug of choice is narcissistic supply, stuff and people. Trauma is what creates the cycles of abuse abused. Either narcissistic people or those who hand their power away to narcissists to try not to lose possible love, approval, security or survival. Then conversely, in amongst the trauma of humanity, people who did not acquire too much accumulated traumas from their ancestors and who were brought up by self-aware parents who were connected into the healthy management of their interior experiences and modelled and helped their children develop that for themselves, were able to have a much more organically healthy relationship with themselves, others and life. That is not narcissists, and because you're watching this video, chances are that was not your experience either. All people struggling with life, self and relationships are having trouble healing their inner trauma. Narcissists and those abused by them. The difference between us and narcissists is that we're not as capable of their lack of conscience because there's still an inner being and a soul under the trauma that we want to go toward, dig out from underneath the rubble and heal. And that's really necessary if we want a great life, because trauma is trauma. Once it's in our inner being at any age, it's there. It's the shadow running our life. And it continues to have its way with us unless released and reprogrammed. And fortunately now, because of super tools like NARP, we have the means to do that, regardless of how big our trauma is or how long we've been suffering from it. The truth is, narcissists and codependents can come from the same families. In families where parents are damaged and traumatized, stuck in survival mode, such as poverty, addictions or domestic abuse, or other factors that makes them emotionally unavailable. This causes anxious, distressed, and disturbed children. Studies conclude conclusively that mental and physical health, employment, societal, and crime issues skyrocket as a result. We also know that this is no different to lab studies on rats. The pups who were born to high-level licking and grooming parents become healthier, less anxious, better integrated rats, and also become HLG parents, high licking grooming parents themselves. The low licking grooming parents have anxious, more aggressive, and more susceptible to disease pups, who themselves become LLG parents. So we know trauma is passed on from generation to generation, and it causes problems in offspring who have never been able to establish the self-awareness necessary, the interrelationship to be at one with themselves. So here it is, when a child feels like that they're no good, not loved, and not worthy of love, they have two options: to try to offset the self-loathing of not being enough by trying to be more. I will make you proud of me. I will do better at school and sport, and I will do all that I can to appease other people's idea of what I should be to be loved, which is what a codependent does. And naturally, this makes them really susceptible to narcissists in the future, trying to appease people who can never be appeased, rather than looking after their own needs and desires. Or the child that feels like they aren't good enough to be loved as themselves will take a different path, become a fictitious self who runs the self-narrative of being awesome. And this takes over from the true self, who feels defective and unworthy of anything. And as a result, that true self is self-abandoned and killed off. This false self is a false self. It's not real feelings. It's a story. It's a constructed version of reality that leads to more and more lies, falsities, and self-deceptions to maintain itself. And a life of pathological, warped insanity ensues, causing a more and more disintegrated connection to self and any reality whatsoever, hence a narcissist. Both paths of necessary emotional survival have a hefty cost. The latter arguably much more so, because there may not be any way back to reality from it. The true self is destroyed in the process of the ever-growing cancer of a false one. Why does one child become a narcissist and the other a codependent? I actually have no idea why a child chooses one of these paths over the other. Maybe the narcissist already had a predisposition in their makeup to become a false self. Maybe that is what their trauma programming already was. Maybe they're a soul contract to another person to push them to the limits of breaking to heal themselves. I totally believe that to be true. So whatever the reason that personality took the path of narcissism, they did it in response to trauma. Either generational, developmental, or both, period. And I also believe that there are no mistakes, because for every narcissist, there is the golden opportunity for every person abused by one to evolve themselves to their ultimate life experience, because the narcissist forced them to do what they never would have done otherwise, that essential inner work. From every trauma and darkness can be mined the incredible transformation into the light. And it's so interesting to know that narcissists can also come from families where the parents and other children have a much healthier self-connection and attachment style. And, you know, they operate much better with themselves, life, and others. In these cases, these children, these narcissistic children, right from the onset, it was described that they were difficult and disturbed, even from little kids. I do believe that some children are born as narcissists into healthy families, and I've heard and seen enough to believe this to be true. I believe epigenetic trauma is totally responsible for this, and I also believe that somewhere not too far back into human history, there will be evidence within that family of a mental illness or addictions or Somebody experienced a pertinent trauma that was never resolved to completion. War veterans and survivors are a perfect example of this. So the parents may have been loving, yet still were carriers of trauma themselves. In relation to developmental narcissism, I believe in the case of the golden child, which is the attractive, smart, sporty child who the narcissist uses the advertisement and the extension of how fantastic he or she is. This being the child who gets granted everything, there is a high propensity for narcissism to develop. This child does not learn disappointments, respecting other people's boundaries, or the word no. If everything is provided for them, there's never been any requirement for self-awareness or for becoming self-partnered with one's own inner emotional experience. So he or she is likely to grow up being entitled, like the narcissistic parent is, and never having learnt healthy limits or the necessity of how to self-soothe. Yet there are children who I know who were targeted as the golden child, who were damaged, but definitely didn't become narcissists. These people who I know are fully dedicated to the reclaiming and healing of their broken parts to come back to integrated wholeness. The real cause of narcissism and the reason why people become susceptible to narcissists is all about unresolved trauma, causing the mechanism, the human, to malfunction into unconsciousness, a disconnection away from self, and then a fruitless focus on trying to blame and change the outside world in order to have a better inner experience. Good luck with that on a macro scale. Have a look at our world and you can see the results of how that has worked out for humankind. It's brought greed, corruption, war, abuse, famine and disease, namely the symptoms of trauma on a big scale. It's everywhere. And that's not how quantum law works. It works as so within, so without. And as thrivers, we come back into consciousness, knowing that we have no power to change anything outside of ourselves from a place of trauma, anxiousness and emptiness. Yet when we become the change on the inside that we want to see in our world, we start to become a generative force of it from an inner beingness of wholeness and true power. When we become trauma-free, we serve ourselves and others in life in co-generative, expansive and abundant ways. Narcissists, in stark contrast, try to forcefully and manipulatively change outside events from a place of chronic neediness, emptiness, and unstable, unresolved inner trauma, which causes the insatiable sucking of people and their environment dry. So to conclude, what causes narcissism? Trauma, period. What keeps generations of abused patterns going? Unresolved trauma, period. Why do some people become a narcissist and others a traumatized person who retains a conscience? Only that inner soul knows. Maybe it was just a case of them taking the blue pill to emotionally survive instead of the red one. Does it really matter? What is, is. What is important is the solution in the best way possible. And there's only one solution. One person at a time, taking responsibility for the trauma in our bodies and releasing and healing it to free ourselves and our future generations to break the vicious grip of unconsciousness on humanity. To do this, there are certain things that you need to do, and one of them is stop being obsessed about what caused narcissism in another person. Because the only answer you need is trauma and the assigning of a false self caused it. And rather than being obsessed about that, we need to simply control and change what we can, which is putting our full determination onto freeing our own inner beings from trauma, which then will bring about so within, so without, meaning that our outer experiences then become freed from trauma as well. And then we get to break the cycles for our future generations, for our children and our children's children. We stop what was happening with those rat pups. even if we're only one parent of a trauma cycle. Okay, so I really want you to feel into this episode. Does it matter to you anymore what caused narcissism? Do you have your answer? Do you know what you can do about this terrible human disease? What do you feel that you can do now? And I would love you to scroll down and answer those questions so that we can all share in this very rich conversation together. It's a very important conversation. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to learn more about how to release your trauma and heal for real from toxic relationships and abuse, you can sign up to my free 16-day recovery course, which includes an invitation to a healing workshop with me, a set of ebooks, and so much more. So to access these, just click the link at the top right of this video. And if you want to see more videos, make sure you like and subscribe so you get notified as soon as each new one is released. So until next time, keep smiling, keep healing, and keep thriving, because there's nothing else to do. Lots of love. Bye-bye.